Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Alexis Haselberger about time management, productivity, and relieving and reducing stress in the workplace. Alexis Haselberger, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We got connected a while back, and I've been looking forward to having the chance to chat with you and have this discussion about effective organizations, productivity, time management, those sorts of issues within organizations. And I know you do a lot of coaching work along those lines. So I look forward to your insights. As we get started today, I want to just quickly share your bio with listeners. Alexis Haselberger is a time management and productivity coach who helps people to do more and stress less through coaching, workshops, and online courses. Her pragmatic yet fun approach helps people easily integrate practical, realistic strategies into their lives so that they can do more of what they want and less of what they don't. Alexis has taught thousands of individuals to take control of their time, their to-do lists, and their overwhelming elements. And her clients include Google, Lyft, Workday, Capital One, Upwork, and many more. And you can definitely get connected with her at her website or on LinkedIn. So Alexis, anything that you would like to add as we dive on in?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it in the bio, but yeah, I work with people and with teams to help them figure out what they really want to do, because we can't do everything, right? And I think, a lot of people think, oh, well, somehow I'm going to figure out how to do everything that's on my list. When really it's much more about prioritizing so that we know that every day we did the things that were more important than the things we didn't do.
Yeah, absolutely. We all have endless lists, right?
Yeah.
I don't like lists. Back when I was definitely a list person when I was a teenager and going through school, my first year of college. And then I left for a couple years. I went and actually served a mission for my church. And so I was off doing volunteer work in South Korea for a couple years and kind of immersed in this new lifestyle, this new context, and learning the Korean language, and just like all of a sudden my to-do list kind of evaporated, and I learned about myself that I'm kind of one of these semi-OCD type people anyways. Like I don't need a list to get me more uptight about like doing more stuff. And so I just, at that point, I got rid of lists and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to try to focus on responding to what's needed in the moment. And that served me quite well throughout my life. And I understand, that's me. Other people function very well with lists, and that's just fine. But the point is that we all have so many things. Like if I kept lists, they would be endless. I would have this never-ending thing that would hang over my head, and I would just feel so much anxiety over that. And so that's why I've chosen not to do lists. I'm really curious to learn about what kind of insights you have for people that are kind of weird like me, and then also people that are probably kind of the more typical list functioning individuals.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I want to touch on about what you said. So, I think a really good point you bring up is that everybody is different, right? This is why it doesn't work to just go read Getting Things Done or read, some book and say like, okay, I'm just going to apply this to my life and everything is going to be better. Because we all have different ways that our brains function, different, anxiety levels. You've got different chronotypes. All of these things affect, what works for us and what doesn't. And so, what I think is also really interesting about you've said what you said is that the list gives you anxiety, right? The list gives me less anxiety, right? And so I actually, I'm saying all the time, a list is not a system. And I actually believe in systems, not lists, because I think, anyone can make a list. It's, do we do the things on the list, and how do we prioritize that? And if you're looking at a list of 1,000 things, how do you ever possibly decide what to do first, right? And so when I work with people, I work on how do we create an external system for our tasks and our projects and all of these things, specifically so that we don't have to use our memories to remember them. Because I think for actually a lot of people, it gives them a lot of anxiety knowing that there's a huge list of things in their heads that isn't somewhere that they can actually look at it linearly and prioritize and move things off of it, decide not to do things. And so I think that's really interesting that you brought up, because what gives some people anxiety actually reduces anxiety in other people, right? But I also believe that we shouldn't have multiple lists, right? Like, I think we get into trouble when we're like, I've got my list on my task app, and I've got some Post-it notes on my desk with lists on them, and I've got a grocery list over here, and I've got all these things. And now we just have way too many things to look at, and it's kind of the same as not having a system at all.
Yeah, and ultimately, if people are feeling overwhelmed, regardless of what their system is, regardless of what their approach is, if people are feeling overwhelmed, then things just don't happen. People tend to shut down at that point. And that's the antithesis of what we're talking about. Like, we want to better manage our time. We want to be more productive, not shut down because of anxiety, and then not be able to do the simple things that need to get done.
Mm-hmm.
So I really love that. So we talked a lot. We could talk more about lists, but I just kind of brought that up as my own, like, kind of weird, quirky thing.
Yeah.
But what are some common issues that you see around productivity and time management? And like, when you meet with executives, or you meet with or you coach individuals, like, what are some of those tactics, of those approaches that tend to work for people?
Yeah. So, I think some of the issues that I see are often around just not even being aware of what's on your plate, right? It's like things are falling through the cracks because you have too much going on. I think there's a certain level at which we can use our brains to keep track of all of the stuff that we've got going on. Or in your case, you said you respond to things as they come in, and that works really well for you. For a lot of executives, they've got not only their entire to-do list, also their family stuff going on. Also, they've got all the stuff they've delegated out to other people, right, that they need to kind of keep track of. And so there's a lot of anxiety that I see in people with just, I've kind of pushed a lot of things out, but I don't have a way to keep track of all of it, right? And so this kind of comes back to the system. I also see people kind of dealing with email and all the Slack and email messages, and these things are just incredibly overwhelming, right? It comes in at such a pace that they can't just react to it, because a lot of people I work with are getting 300, 400 emails a day, and they're not able to just say, okay, well, I just go through them, right? And so what I work on a lot with people is, how do we be more proactive about planning out our schedules, planning out our days? How do we in fact be kind of the opposite of what you've said, is be less reactive to what is coming in, so that we can make more time for the actual hard work that we need to do, and be less reactive to kind of shiny objects that come in. Because what I found for people who don't have, for people who have a lot on their plates, if they're just reacting as things come in, then they're sometimes making the wrong decisions, right? That thing that comes in, it feels very urgent, it feels very important. But if they were to compare it to what else they've got to accomplish that day, it actually isn't more important than those things.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think it's about prioritizing, right? And understanding that some things simply aren't urgent. Some things just don't matter. And leaders, executives in particular, they're dealing with big picture strategic issues. And if they get bogged down into lists and into the constant onslaught of everything that comes their way, then they don't have the mental bandwidth to deal with the big picture stuff, the strategic stuff. And I see that all the time. I see leaders that really aren't leading. They're simply going to meetings. They're churning through to-do lists, and they are getting some stuff done. but they're not actually providing a strategy, a vision, and they're not actually creating a context where people feel motivated to fulfill that mission.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right. I think the number one thing that I see when I'm working with executives is that they say, I don't have any time for deep work. I don't have any time for strategic thought. And, one quick little fix that we have is literally do that stuff first. Do that stuff before you look at your email, before you look at, all of the other things that are incoming. Because what happens is, I think most people have a tendency to want to check off like the easy stuff first, right? You're like, oh, the email, great. That's a dopamine hit every single time I get one of those emails out, and I can churn through 1,000 of them, right? But it's not really getting you anywhere. Versus if you can say, even just take the first hour of your day and focus on whatever the most important strategic plan is, or the most important, maybe it's just that you have to get, you're a startup founder and you have to get your proposal out to that, new client that you're hoping will create revenue for you, or whatever that is. But being able to say, I do that work first, then I respond to the other things that are coming my way. Because otherwise what happens is you just start, I call it letting the day happen to you, where you start with response and then somehow you get to 6, 7 p.m. You can't point to anything you've done, although you've been working all day long.
Yeah, and I think that happens all the time to individuals, and that's the quickest way to get burned out, because again, you have it in the back of your mind, there are like these pressing strategic issues that need to be addressed, and you're not getting to it day in and day out. One day goes by, a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, and you still haven't put the mental energy behind these issues because you're just trying to roll through things. So I think prioritization is a huge factor in this, whatever your system is, or how you deal with those, how you get pinged with, needs. One of the things I see so often, and I hear leaders talk about often, is that all they ever do all day, every day, is putting out fires.
Yeah.
And that, I get it because I understand they're getting pinged constantly and you have to respond to urgent tasks. But I also feel like when leaders get into that mode where they're only putting out fires all the time, what that means is that's never going to change for them. That's going to end up being their style and their approach for forever, unless something disrupts it. And what they need to do is they need to find a way, and this may take a little bit of extra concerted effort, up front, but to get ahead of the game a little bit, so you're not working in crisis mode all the time, so that you have the bandwidth and the capacity to deal with crises that do arise, so that you can put out fires when they emerge, but so that you're not overwhelmed by the fires that need to be put out. And so people who have a tendency to procrastinate, or they struggle with really prioritizing their to-do lists, or whatever their system is for managing their time, they end up just working in crisis mode. They end up working in putting out fires rather than laying the groundwork for a sustainable, healthy organization where people feel empowered, they feel like they have autonomy, they've been delegated to, they can make their own decisions, so that you're not, leaders don't necessarily need to get pinged 500 times a day by their team, right? And so if they are, that says something about how they're working with their team. That needs to be disrupted and addressed, so that you are connected with your team. You're going to have regular communication with your team. There will be urgent things that you have to respond to. You have good people around you. Like, trust them, like work with them, empower them, let them do their jobs, because you don't have the bandwidth to do their jobs for them.
Right. I think you bring up a really good point. It's making me think of, time I was doing a leadership and time management and management workshop for a large tech giant who will not be named. And I was recommending that people turn off their email notifications, right? Just turn them off. You don't need them. People are not in an emergency. Nobody's going to rely on email. Nobody's going to be like, Alexis, the building was on fire, but we didn't come get you because you didn't answer your email, right? Like, nobody's doing that. And I got a question from one of the execs that said, well, I've heard that the marker of a good manager is how quickly they respond to their email. And I was like, absolutely not, right? If you're a manager and your goal is how quickly do I respond to emails? Like emails are other people's priorities, right? And so of course you want to be, you want to be able to respond to your team, but you don't need to do it in 30 seconds, right? That's just going to disrupt you all day long. It also makes me think of, I've worked with a few entrepreneurs who have later, turned into a different career, so become VCs and things like that. And they often have a lot of trouble switching out of that actually comfortable crisis mode position of, I just fight fires all day long, because it was they didn't have to do any prioritization, right? It was very obvious what to do. It's like, here's a fire, I put out the fire. And then they move into a more long-term role like investing and things like this, where it's not I fight this fire and it's obvious what happened tomorrow. It's, oh, I need to make longer-term plays, longer-term decisions. And now I don't know how to spend my time anymore. So I think you brought up a really good point there.
So yes, you bring up some great points. So how has this changed? How has time management and productivity changed now that we're in a pandemic environment? So many remote workers. We don't have, if I'm a manager that likes the style of just circulating around the office space and observing those around me and seeing, who has a look on their face like they don't understand, they need some help. If that's my style, man, this is going to be kind of a hard situation for them. Some employees are perfectly well suited to work remotely and will be just fine doing that. And they're self-motivated, they're self-driven, they're organized, they can do that. Others may struggle with how to balance work, life, family, school, all those different things. So what would your advice be to executives today about dealing with remote teams in a COVID environment?
Yeah, so I think there are two sides of it. Well, I've been working with a lot of executives and a lot of teams on this problem, obviously, because this is, everybody's top of mind for the last 4 months or so. And I would say that it comes from two angles, right? So one is from the management style. If you're used to management by walking around, you're right, this is going to be harder to do that. What we want to really avoid is that urge to micromanage, because what we know is that, people leave managers who micromanage them. Right. And so I think that it's a really normal urge, right? You're like, oh, I have no control anymore. I don't see anything. I don't have that. And we want to now say, okay, I want an update from you. I want an update from you. I want an update from you. I think we actually need to pull back and just start with trust, right? Say that, okay, our employees, we hired them for a reason. They're good at their jobs. We're going to start with trust, and we're going to manage to goals and expectations. We're going to make goals and expectations incredibly clear, and we're going to manage to that. And we're not going to manage so much to, FaceTime and things like that. I think the other side of it is that you have to really over communicate in these times, right? I'm sure you're familiar with, Dr. Morabian's law of communication, right? Which says that we get 7% of our understanding from the words, 38% from the tone and the voice, and 55% from our body language, right? And so using video wherever possible, never giving feedback over, an asynchronous method of communication. So like feedback should always be given over video, never over Slack, because it's very easy to misunderstand, right? And you're laughing, but this is something that is really rampant out there. And also just asking your employees, like, what do they need, right? When you're having your one-on-ones, and make sure that you're not canceling your one-on-ones, as now that's probably the only time that your employees are getting with you one-on-one per week, right? You're not just randomly seeing them in the hallway. You want to say, like, what do you need? What would make your work life easier? Is there anything that you don't have at home that you did have at the office that we could provide for you? Sometimes that's an extra monitor that actually really improved their and that's $200 that you could spend that would greatly improve their productivity and their stress levels, right? Maybe it's that like their Wi-Fi sucks, right? And they need just that to be upgraded. And these are all sorts of things that employees don't really want to ask for. Like they feel like there's a lot going on. But if you as a leader can really tune in to your team and say, what do you need? Sometimes it's flexible schedules. Sometimes it's like, you know what? They're home with toddlers and they need to be working in shifts with their partner. One person needs to be working from 6 a.m. to 2 and the other person the other shift, and we need to do that. So it could be so many different things depending on what people's life circumstances are, but really bringing that out into the open, asking the questions and making sure their employees feel comfortable to ask for what they need, I think is
awesome. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And well, you said several things there that I think are really important to key in on. And one is simply just recognizing that everyone will have a different need in terms of what their current situation is.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are at home alone, and so they don't have distraction per se, but they have social isolation
Yeah.
that is really going to impact their mental health potentially. Um, Other people, have a house full, that they're trying to just juggle all
Yeah.
this stuff, and then everything in between. You have people that are sick. We're in the middle right now of just a very tumultuous socio-political environment. So you have all of that layered on top of all this, and so yeah, if we have remote teams and remote individuals as a leader, over communication, like you said, I don't think you can over communicate. I think if you're sending like a million 2-sentence emails to people, that's probably over communicating. But that's not what we mean, right?
Right. And
um,
we're not talking about like quantity. We're talking about quality, right?
yeah, and regularity,
Mm-hmm.
so that people know. You mentioned expectations, just managing those expectations and helping people know what's expected of them and how they're going to be evaluated, and then let people do their work. It doesn't really matter, um, especially in a virtual environment. You're not in the office together. Like, people need to, if you have synchronous meetings, sure, show up to the meeting, but other than that, who cares if they need to get up at 4 in the morning to do some work, or work at 9 p.m. after the kids go to bed? Who cares
Right.
when they're doing it? And I think this moment is perhaps forcing people to wrestle with that, the kind of the workplace norms that we've just kind of commonly accepted, and trying to take a second look. Does that really matter as we move forward?
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point about does these things really matter? And I think what's been so interesting to me as I've been coaching leaders and things on this is that the advice that I'm giving for the most part is not like qualitatively different than the advice I would be giving about good management otherwise. It's just that it matters so much more now, right? It's like you don't have that social glue of being in the office. You don't have the other things to kind of grease the wheels. And so you have to be more intentional and you have to make sure you're even more clear.
Yeah. Well, good. It has been a lot of fun talking with you today. We're about out of time, but I do want to make sure that you have the chance to share with the audience. How can they get connected with you, learn more about what you're doing, and reach out to you if they need some assistance?
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. So my website is probably the number one place to learn more about what I do and how I work with people. So it's alexishaselberger.com. Hopefully you'll put that in the show notes because no one can spell my last name. Also, you can reach me at Instagram at do.more.stress.less or on Facebook at Do More Stress Less. But really email me if you need anything. If you have a follow-up question, it's alexis@alexishaselberger.com. And also,
Oh,
oh, sorry, one more thing.
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Distractions are rampant, right, in our houses right now. And so if people are looking for some simple ways to reduce distractions, no matter where they are, home or office, you can just go to my website, alexishaselberger.com/reduce-distraction and get a free guide for how to do that just really quickly.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Well, I hope my listeners will reach out. This has been an excellent discussion. We've really honestly only had the chance to scratch the surface. There's so much more that you can learn from Alexis by going to her website. Please reach out and get connected with her. Alexis, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. And I just want to wish everyone a great week, and I hope everyone stays healthy and safe.
Thanks so much.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.